Welcome, everyone, to Fireside Chat on the future of development, because development is very much changing. My name is Danny Allan. I'm the Chief Technology Officer at Sneak. But interestingly, I am joined with the founder of Sneak and the CEO of Tesla, Gaipo. Maybe you want to introduce yourself for the audience.
Danny, great to be at a Sneak event, virtually here. Yeah, I'm a Guy Podjarny, or Gaipo. I had the pleasure of co-founding Sneak a decade ago now. And about a year and a half ago, I felt the company was doing very well, and I caught the AI bug and dove into founding an AI company focusing on reimagining software development, which is Tesla. So yeah, here we are. But have a lot of thoughts about both security and the future of where software development might lie.
Well, I know you've been involved in software development for 25 years now. And actually, just to kick us off, you mentioned you caught the AI bug. Do you think that AI is going to change development in a massive way, like more so than any time in the past?
Yeah, I think very much so. It's probably true for any knowledge work. For our lives, for ecosystems, it can get very big. I don't know if I'd say I'm maximalist. I'm less of sort of the AGI sort of less focused on that sort of super intelligence world. But I do think AI will substantially change knowledge work as we really move into delegating much of the work that we do to AI. And specifically in software development, I think it means some form of elevation of the kind of the role of the developer to something that is a higher resolution thing. It actually means, I sometimes say that I think the fact that you're a software engineer, that you have to be an engineer to build software, is actually like a mistake of history, and that software is creation, and that AI actually has an opportunity to take away some of the aspects of the technical constraints or needs for developing software and allow you to really focus on software creation, on building. And I like the move back to the word developer. But it's a different type of activity, clearly less coding oriented, but also higher resolution, higher pace, much more akin to delegating tasks to fellow humans or outsourcing companies.
Yeah, it's interesting. The way I think about it is we've gone through kind of three steps. When I first started developing, you used to write the code from the ground up, and then open source took off, and we
Right.
got out of the business of writing a lot of that software. And then the AI coding assistants came along, and obviously they're helping in creating the code. But we're in a whole new era now of spec-driven development, and that's emerging. So maybe we'll start with that, because I know Tesla's very involved here. What is spec-driven development for a developer?
Uh, Sure. So spec-driven development is the notion that you will move from writing the code and having your software center around an implementation of how it works and what are the features, into capturing the definition of your software in some form of spec, some document that says what you want to build, and whatever is important to you about how you want to build it, and have the AI handle the coding. And when you think about building software like that, it has a lot of core advantages. You can only define the application to the resolution that you want because the LLMs can fill in the gaps. If AI writes the code, then AI can maintain the code. It can handle it, so you can focus a lot more on evolving the functionality and on the creative aspect of it. But it also starts kind of raising some questions of, okay, if you build software like this, how do you debug it if it doesn't work? Because it's not going to be perfect. How do you observe a running system? What is the life cycle of such software? It's going to be much more dynamic. How do you version it? What's an ecosystem? And so all of this encapsulates in this world of spec-driven development to say this is a new development paradigm. It's a different way of building software. And at Tesla, this is kind of our vision. This is our passion to say, how do we enable that? How do we shape this new way of developing software? And then, of course, how do we kind of tie it to the present and help all of us along that journey?
How is that different than the product world where you wrote PRDs? Well, it sounds like you're describing that the engineer is going away, and the product manager is now the creator of the software in creating a PRD. Is it different than that?
So when you build software today, the product manager might come along with a PRD, but there are many fundamental decisions around the product's functions that are being done by the engineers or by the sort of the software developers, the architects, and those decisions have to do with preferences on what's fast versus what's slow, what are the easier versus harder actions. Some of them indeed manifest in the design, what type of data patterns are you optimizing for? Is it more about large scale or sort of small scale? And many decisions around flows and steps and how extensible versus how simple it is. And so all of those they're kind of product decisions, but they're not necessarily the product manager's role. So
Yeah.
I do think that developers need to move up that definition level, and they should care less about whether they're using a for loop or a while loop, or whether they're using sort of JavaScript promises or or whatever direct function calls. But they do need to decide some architectural decisions, some taste decisions, and a fair bit of product roles. And so it is an elevation in the sense of moving up to the resolution of what you're looking at,
Hmm.
either towards more of a product manager or towards more of an architect type role, deciding a breadth. And I do think product managers in turn will be able to build things and be a lot closer to the actual delivery of the software. So I think both roles will change a fair bit.
Are you still going to have a products requirement document? In other words, what's the source of truth? Traditionally now, I think of the source of truth is you have product requirements document, it's given to the engineer and they write code, and then the code becomes the source of truth. How do those two things evolve in a spec-driven world?
So, in general, you still need to define what your product is, and in fact, specs make that better.
Yes.
I will point out that when you talk about how do you build up an application, as the world has become more agile, more continuous, you probably do a lot less sort of thinking up front and a lot more iterating. And I don't think
Mhm.
that changes. I think AI makes software creation faster, more agile, more dynamic. And so I think you still you don't necessarily need to spec everything out up front. You can iteratively evolve it. Um, but this capturing of what your product does over time is the core element of the spec, right? If you think about the inevitable life cycle of software project today, right? You start, you build a new product, you're fast, right? You have a small team that holds the whole product in its head. You build along, you run the code base relatively small. And then hopefully you found product market fit and you're building out the product. Your product grows, the team grows, people leave, it's more complicated, and increasingly things slow down.
Mhm.
People are afraid that they will break something because you never actually kept some document or some capturing of what it is that your product does. It's only the code that lived on. And as that continues, inevitably it grows and grows and grows, and you get to this decomposition, replatforming project that everybody undergoes. We did at Snake as well, in which you ironically have to come back and reverse engineer what does your product do and capture that into a document so that you can build it again. And the intent of spec-driven development is to flip that around and say, well, the code is the piece that should be dynamic, that should change all the time. But really what should be the defining document over time is this spec.
Right.
And I think the key reason this is possible today is that LLMs make it possible to do this and still be fun. In the past, if you had to really only use these very harsh, very detailed specifications, there was a notion of, well, if you're going to specify to this level, you might as well write the code. Like, it is
Right.
very, very detailed. But today we can delegate to this intelligence, and we can choose just how much empowerment do we give these agents. How much do we choose and we spec out versus how much do we delegate, and that allows us to maintain the important bits in a spec and to have this sort of running document that says what your product is, and to never get to that slowdown part.
And what are the domains of the specs? Because I can imagine you have an application spec, but you might have a data spec, an infrastructure spec. You see some high-level domains that we'll all have to define as part of the process?
Absolutely. I think the key two distinctions that we're seeing are between specs that define what you build and specs that define how you're going to build it.
Mhm.
And we sometimes refer to them as app specs versus platform specs.
Okay.
The app specs are more about capturing the definition of the product. I want, an e-commerce site, I want a checkout action, I want it to have a button. I might delegate the color of the button to the LLM to choose. And you want to build those out. Those are compelling, and they allow that sort of future opportunity to capture what the product does over time. The second category is more about how the agent builds. When you think about any organization, you have purchased some SaaS solutions, you've defined some practices, you chose a programming language, you have a platform you build on. You don't really, a developer coming onto the team doesn't have full full control to build in whatever technology they fancy. And so all of those are definitions about what you build, how do you write your commit messages, what is the right way for a developer to operate in this company. And so those platform specs also contribute to things like what is good quality code, what is secure code.
Right.
And they today are much more urgent for people to address because they have these agents, and these agents kind of go off the rails. They do crazy things. There's sometimes spooky, sometimes kooky, and sort of their capabilities. And so the ability to rein them in, to try and help them be effective developers within the team is more urgent to people at the moment. But the promise of these app specs, I think, is the future that we lead to. And at Tessel, we work on both, clearly,
Right.
because there's more pull at the moment on the platform specs. We have a spec registry. We have sort of offerings to sort of help you capture that type of knowledge and distribute it to the agents. Then that has been kind of the more immediate focus.
Well, I love the promise, and it is taking off. But what are the misconceptions? Like, what is holding this back? It sounds like this is nirvana, and AI can enable it. What are the biggest misconceptions that are putting pause on the spec market, maybe?
I think so. There are a few. One is that people perceive specs as something that is more work, that would slow them down,
Okay.
especially if you're in the camp that is building with agents. Velocity is very, very key. It's true for everyone, but specific for this camp. And so sometimes they hear spec and they say, okay, like that would be more work up front. And I think that's a misconception. We basically see two patterns of using Tesla or building with specs. One is indeed you create the spec and you engage with it and you're very detailed up front, which for some tasks that is the right thing, and for some individuals, but also the same people in different settings. And the second is this notion we started calling vibe specking, which is you still give instructions to this sort of being, this entity that is the agent, and you let them make the decisions, but you tune them so that they capture their intent, what they mean to build in a spec first, and then they build out of that. And that every time you give them more instruction, something doesn't work, you're iterating, they modify the spec, and then they write the code. And the result of that is, first of all, you have a spec there, so if something fails, you can interact with it, and you can say, did you build the wrong thing? Did you misunderstand my intent? Or did you just fail to implement? And the second is that agents have amnesia. Agents, they don't have institutional knowledge, as in that story of the company evolving. And so this gives tomorrow's agent context of what did today's agent try to do, and that really helps in preventing breakage. And then you can go off and you can enhance those specs. We talk about a loose then strict mode, in which you start by just providing guidance. They're what we call inspirational specs. They're helpful, but they're not mandatory. And then you can start augmenting them with tests in a very easy fashion that sort of hardens them as they build.
Does this change the way that education takes place? Because right now, computer science, you go through, you learn how to do whatever languages and writing code and taking PRDs. Does this mean that you think education needs to change, that people understand a different mode of computer science?
I do. I think I'm actually more extreme in my views on that front. Like I think there are portions of what you learn in a computer science degree that are still relevant. You still need to think about architecture. You still need to think about what is data. You still need to think about trade-offs that you might take. And for the next few years, you also still need to know some of the technical information. But I think we're moving away from that, just like we're moving away from needing to understand assembly or needing to understand, how electric circuits work. Or I think the primary job of a developer is to understand the craft of building a product and to understand maybe security implications, like everything that surrounds a product. And I highly doubt that universities will adapt at the pace that they need to. So I think the universities still serve a role from a filtering perspective, from a the notion of challenging young people, with something hard and having them, persevere and work through it from a networking perspective. But I put less and less weight on the actual practical application skills or developer training that they might offer.
So In this world then, where a spec-driven developer comes in and starts defining it, I have to believe that agents are doing a lot of the actual work. But let's put our finger directly on what problem you're solving. What is the pain or the problem that the agent is actually solving from traditional development?
So agents actually connected TESL to the present, right?
Okay.
Spectre development is the sort of future, right?
Okay.
It's a better way of building software. But as you kind of rightly say, like what pain are they solving? They're solving the big pain of software development, and
Yeah.
that's tough. That's a that's a big kind of a leap to make. And agents. Agents do everything that we described around the evolution of a software project, but faster, right? They
Right.
code faster, they forget faster, they create a mess faster, they get you in trouble faster.
Yeah.
And people are feeling that very much. And it's not about you create a code today and in 2 years' time, when people leave their company and the product grew, you'd have a problem. It's tomorrow, your agent, you asked it to add one feature and it'll burn down the house, it'll break three others while it builds it. And so this notion of capturing the guidance you want to give the agents, what do you actually want them to do? And communicating that to the agent, that is an immediate need.
Hmm.
The notion of creating guardrails around it, the idea of defining the right way, what is quality in your organization, what is what are the design principles you want to follow, what is your security policy, all of those things are very kind of alive and well. And so the pain we solve today is keeping agents on rails. It's just sort of aligning agents. We think about Tesla as an agent enablement platform
Uh-huh.
that really kind of helps you enable this new workforce that you have there in development. And if you've done sales enablement or developer enablement, then you know that, or security enablement, then you know that entails, first of all, capturing what it is that you want to do, and
Hmm.
then you need to think about what are the right tools, what are the right means, and then you need to distribute that. And so that is the pain that we solve today for organizations, and expanding that into the ecosystem as a whole.
And so what stops us from doing that? What are the challenges? If you go into an organization, you describe this, it sounds amazing. What holds them back from actually moving to a new way of
Yeah.
developing the software?
So one key challenge is defining what's right.
Uh,
As people, we take shortcuts, right? It's like, hey, what do you want for your birthday? Well, you choose, right? And it's really hard to know what we want. And organizations are like that. Culture is this murky thing. The development practices are these murky things. Even when they're written down, they're oftentimes a bit more aspirational than realistic. And so one kind of holdback is just, how do you create these specs? Not so much technically, but like, what is the substance that you want
right.
from them? And so the spec generation is important. The second is the pace of change is dizzying, and so what is it that you even want to enable? Is it
Yeah.
so 6 months ago it would have been IDE, context. Now you're starting to talk about terminal-based codings, and is that the future? Agents proliferate and they keep moving, and so the dealing with sort of this fast-moving landscape, trying to be ready for tomorrow, but also actually capitalize on value today. That is hard. So again, we're trying to address it, but oftentimes people don't know which features, which capabilities do they even want to capture. Um, Mostly, I think this is just very new. I'm talking here about enabling agents. Coding agents were like barely a thing 6 months ago, right? You had like Devin floating around and being kind of not very successful at the time. So I think a lot of it is just remembering at this sort of extreme pace that it's still new,
Uh-huh.
and working along. And oftentimes what companies most want when they engage with us is just to have a good partner that is tracking this space, that understands it, and that helps them be successful with these agents.
Are there verticals or geographies that you see as being ahead, or is it just it's across the board, all software is software, and it's just the forward-thinking companies?
Um, I think mostly it follows technology trends. And
Right.
so just like the technology adopters, it starts in the Silicon Valley. Everybody's very like optimistic and sort of a future leaning over there. And then it is easier for younger companies to adopt agents. What is unusual is that you do see a lot more attention being given to it by traditionally slower moving organizations,
Mhm.
and they want to run with it. When they work within an existing system with a lot to lose, they really encounter this sort of capability, reliability gap, right? In which they're very capable, but they're very unreliable, these agents.
Right.
And so the focus is a little bit different. They're looking for the places in which they can deploy agents. They tend to be less in the kind of the heart, but they are unlike maybe the cloud era, if you think about that, where you had to kind of pull them kicking and screaming into that world, and they had to start worrying for their sort of existence, right? And new companies coming away to take their business. People are actually very aware that this will be transformative, and so they're investing the time and money. But big companies are still big companies, and they still move slowly. Regulated companies have their challenges, and in fact, I'd sort of say they were gun ho before. And now some of them are a little bit disillusioned. So it's like, okay, this is not an overnight I will change my development, but rather a journey.
Yeah. I want to pivot over now to security because obviously this is DevSecCon and we're talking about security and the concept of agents. And I want to connect those two things together in a moment. But we've seen now developer experience and focus on security within the developer experience. And we're seeing the emergence of these agents and spec-driven development and all of these things. What do you fundamentally believe is the most important thing that we can do for security as we're building agentic-based software?
So for starters, I'd say we need to indeed capture what is correct. I
Right.
think security is reasonably good at knowing you don't want things to be vulnerable, but
Right.
I think we also are aware of the challenges of prioritization and the likes. And so just sort of capturing what is correct, what is incorrect, what is the guidance that we want to give agents, what is, the behavior we want to see them enact. And so I think that is one thing. Just sit down, write those down. So you can do them in specs and distribute them, but even if it's within the room, just sort of define that. And then subsequently, it's important to anchor in the future.
Hmm.
One of the challenges that we have is because of the pace of transition. When we talk about a security program and you think about rolling it out, it's oftentimes you need to hedge. You need to say, well, but if I'm going to do this, then it wouldn't work for people. And given the pace of change that is happening here and given the magnitude of it, I think it is important to try and go through the exercise of, if I only cared about agent security, what would it look like?
Right.
And give some subsets of appropriately sized sort of number of resources, give them autonomy to build, for that world without needing to hedge. And what you find is all sorts of things could be made better for the agents, even if you don't know how to do them before. Agents have these different attributes, like, they actually read the docs. There's all these memes around, oh, we wouldn't write the docs for one another.
Right.
And, now we do for agents. Yeah, because agents will actually read them.
Yeah.
And so that's, one aspect. Others are, in the agent world, developer time is cheap.
Yes.
And so maybe there are a bunch of nice to haves, fixes, secure by default, like, or risk reduction elements that we couldn't really justify developer time on before, and we can now. And in general, agents are an automation tool.
Hmm.
And so when you are thinking about all the things that you want developers to do, as hard as it is to wrangle agents, it is easier than wrangling human developers. And so I think it's important to anchor in the future and to define what that destination is. And then doing that while hedging is hard. So I think define that on its own, try to roll that out to your sort of top tiers, just like, frankly, we oftentimes did with cloud security, and then try to bridge the gap.
Well, two things I want to touch on. In cloud security, we made an awful lot of errors, I'll say, at the very beginning, which led to all kinds of security issues. Like S3 buckets 2 years after we started putting things in the cloud, we realized they were all insecure. And so
Yep.
we didn't have security at inception or at the beginning. And we've been talking a lot about security at inception. Do you think that the specs themselves will have security in? Do you think we're going to solve this problem of security at the beginning in a specs-driven world? Or do you think we're going to fall into the same hole of we start this new way of development and security isn't thought of from the
Yep.
beginning?
I think, first of all, I'll correct a bit, and I'd say cloud naturally took away a whole bunch of security issues
That's true.
by the fact that it went, into these like highly secure data centers and all that. So it fixed a whole sort of slew of security flaws right away.
Especially at the infrastructure level.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then what it did is it democratized access to creating new servers and new infrastructure on top of that.
Right.
And because it democratized that, then now everybody could create it, and security was an afterthought. And suddenly, misconfigured infrastructure became, maybe still is today, the biggest sort of security gap or security issue that we see. And so I think with LLMs, we should think about two aspects. One is, I think LLMs enable or democratize the creation of software. And
Right.
so everybody will be creating software. Everybody is now creating software. And therefore, I think software security and vulnerable software is going to be the biggest problem of sort of the next wave. And I'm excited for Snyk's role in helping address that. But I think it's an inevitability. Like, we'll have more software created by people that are less proficient at creating that software. It'll be all over the place, and we'll probably suffer some consequences of it, because security is always a little bit of an afterthought. I think when it comes to practices within software development, within agentic security, within already professional software development organizations, yes, I'm actually quite excited about the opportunity to automate many things that were hard to get people to consistently apply,
Right.
including security issues and fixing them. And I draw the analogy of self-driving cars and how they would reduce accidents. Right, a lot of these mistakes, a lot of the flaws that we see today are caused by just sort of people getting distracted, people doing things that they shouldn't, and the likes, versus just inability to apply. And I think self-driving cars can address a lot of that. I think similarly, agents might not always get it right, but they will get distracted less. They will, not have their own agenda. And so the opportunity to create more secure software, if you put the right security tooling and controls in the hands of the agents, and you have the right specification to guide them, then I think it is a very kind of good reality that we can work on within the professional development world.
You're getting greater consistency. I was in Phoenix 2 weeks ago and took a Waymo for the first time, and I was completely sold. Like, if I compare it to the Uber drivers that I have that are all over the place, Waymo is far more consistent. The second thing that you mentioned, I want to just touch on very quickly. You said developer time is cheaper, that it's easier with these agents to develop software. And you and I have had this discussion in the past. And in the past, we optimized for false positives. We didn't want to waste developer time, and so we would prioritize only the critical things. Obviously, in an agentic world, they can do everything because they have all the time to read all the specs and all the documentation and solve all the problems. How do you think about that in the context of agents? Are we now optimizing for false negatives that we don't miss anything, and then we're triaging? How do you think about that?
I think it's a really compelling opportunity. I think most false positives are not really false positives, right? If some
Right.
sort of code scanner, notably Snyk or others, tells you about a security problem, it probably is a security problem. It's just localized. It might not be exploitable all the way. And developer time is very precious.
Right.
And so there's a big legitimate desire to say, well, hide these, right? Don't tell me about
Yes.
them. Only tell me about things that you can really see are exploitable. But with agents, they're just a small inference, sort of payment to do that, and you can make software secure much more deeply. You'd have these sort of layers of defense in depth, and I think that's really a great opportunity to ask different questions. Well, now when you see a false positive, the question of, is this worth my AI developer time, is actually not that interesting. The question you want to ask is, well, does this make me more secure or less? And does this make me, is there a risk here that I will break functionality? And I love how that actually moves quality and security together, right? It actually makes security, again, because you wouldn't say, oh, this is a bug, but it's not very significant. It's just a little bit of a memory optimization, so I'd rather not do it. It's all improvements, they all increment. So I think this is one good example of agents being able to change the nature of what is and isn't important in security product. Other examples are indeed that agents will read documents, and so sometimes providing many examples that are kind of worthless because developers are just not going to read them are actually perfect for agents. We find that agents, they really benefit from example-based documentation. And we're talking, it's like, if you have documentation page today that is like a Chinese menu in which you can say, I want my noodles with beef, or with beef and shrimp, or with beef and shrimp
Chicken.
and chicken, whatever it is, and or chicken and shrimp. It's like, well, that's terrible documentation. Like,
Right.
I don't want all of that. But for agents, that's actually perfect. It's like, well,
Yeah.
they come across a use case and they want that. So there are a greater opportunity. There is a great opportunity to provide very kind of prescriptive best practices, secure best practices, and again, to kind of weave them in with security, but also quality and resilience and many other aspects of sort of great software.
So, and I know we're running out of time here, but when you think about the speed and autonomy at which agents work, how do we prevent them from introducing security issues and vulnerabilities at the same rate that we have in the past? Because they're moving so quickly, they're generating all this code. There has to be a way to put guardrails in place to secure the agents.
So we've kind of naturally, the conversation in the ecosystem has moved from LLMs to agents, and the key
Right.
distinction between the two is tools.
Mhm.
And so I think, yeah, LLMs, just out of their sort of brilliant minds, I don't think will write code that is naturally secure. It's complicated.
Right.
They might be better than average, but they will still write vulnerabilities. And I think agents introduce a much more compelling promise around secure software, because they can be equipped with tools. They can have Snyk available to them so that they find out that something is vulnerable, and then they can take action and fix those vulnerabilities. And so I think there's a huge opportunity to create software in a way that is much more secure upfront, in an automated and consistent fashion. I do think we're going to face another problem in other parts of the world of all of the non-software developers that are creating software. And so we need to expand maybe the notion of software security, application security to the broader world. But I really think that getting agents to create secure code is a very real and immediate opportunity that we should lean heavily into.
And is this the synergy then that between spec-driven development and agents that you see that isn't natural and complementary as we move forward into this new AI era?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it actually blends in sort of the three parts that we're talking about here, right? The power of LLMs and agents,
Yep.
the definitions of specs that say what it is that you want, what is secure software for you, and tools like Snyk that help the agent find out whether something is vulnerable and what can they do about it.
What makes you most excited? You're looking forward now, we're seeing agent spec-driven development. What's the most exciting thing that's in our future?
Um, I'm excited by the broadening the access to software creation. And as I mentioned, I think software creation is creation, and you're developing it because you're evolving some piece of functionality, but you shouldn't need to engineer it. Like, I would love, my parents and my kids and, all the non-technical people in my life to be able to bring their ideas to life. And so I'm excited by just the explosion of creativity that would bring to the software world.
It is amazing. We've gone from whatever, 20, 40 million developers to 8 billion AI innovators with the technology that we have today. And exciting that Tesla and Snyk together are bringing these opportunities to market.
Absolutely.
Well, no question that the future of development is changing in a very radical and significant way, and it's exciting to be on the forefront of all of this. Thank you for joining me, Guy.
So thanks for having me, and I hope the conference continues to be amazing.
Thank you.